The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. So now that we've laid the foundation, I want to go into the theme of your book, which is forgiveness. And for me, I'm working on it, but forgiveness can be elusive sometimes, especially when an act is as egregious as the one that you experienced. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about the offender a little bit and about your interactions with him. But first, do you remember what the offender's sentence was?
Well, there's always a sidebar when we talk about this. It's the difference between the legal system and the justice system are certainly vast, as you're well aware.
Yes.
Two kids involved, a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old. The kid who pulled the trigger was 15. When his case went to court, despite the state's attorney trying to get it upgraded to a criminal status, the judge ruled that this young man, had a learning disability and was easily influenced, and so he kept it as a juvenile case.
Okay.
The lookout is the guy who took the hit for this. Now, the kid who pulled the trigger went on the stand and said, quote, "I pulled the trigger with the intent of killing him."
Mm. That's
me. That changed the case against the other kid because he's a co-conspirator, then it was attempted first-degree murder. So he got 8, 10, 12, and 21 years concurrently.
Okay.
As a grown-up. The 15-year-old did time in juvenile system, and when I went to court, the state's attorney said, "I've got to tell you what we're doing here, what the play is, so you don't flip out." See, there was the same two guys with another guy robbed somebody of $40 an hour and a half earlier on basically the same area. And for that, the 15-year-old was arrested, tried, convicted, and sentenced as an adult.
Wow, it's a lesser crime.
An hour and a half later, he suddenly got younger again. So that was crazy. And the guy said to me, the state's attorney, he said, "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask that the case against this kid is dropped for time served." Why? Well, because otherwise he'll sit in the juvenile system till he's 21. Drop it, and there's not a pending juvenile case. Then the criminal case against him, when he's 18, gets thrown into prison, not the juvenile system. So if we want him to do any time at all, hard time, that's what we're going to do. And I thought, how convoluted is that? It's, again, kind of out of my hands. I could have improved my case against him by either giving up money or dying. I didn't do either.
So following the case, you actually visited the shooter in prison?
No, I visited the 16-year-old.
Oh, then I misunderstood that. Okay.
Yeah. Although I did see the shooter in the juvenile court.
Okay, so was...
You need to make a victim statement.
Right. Okay, now it's starting to make a lot more sense to me, at least. So when you visited the accomplice in prison, was that part of your spiritual or psychological healing?
Yes.
Okay, and how so?
Well, as I was there, first of all, it wasn't spontaneous. I'd been thinking about this. I need to get past because I'm so angry. I wanted justice. I wanted revenge. Mm-hmm. It's like, because I never had I was blindsided here. The 16-year-old was kind of the ringleader of the thing, so he wasn't exactly an innocent child. But I drove down to Galesburg 3.5 hours, and I'm thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Well, I got there, and I emptied my pockets and signed in as an acquaintance, something that changed the visiting policy after they found out that I was there. But I thought, well, I'll get 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, between the double glass and on a phone, and I don't know what my total purpose was, other than to just look this guy in the eye. Well, instead, I go to a cafeteria and sit there and wait for 45 minutes for this fellow to come down. The last time I had seen him, he was being marched out of 26th 26th in California in an orange jumpsuit.
Mm-hmm.
And when he showed up, his eyes just lit up. And I walked over to him, put out my hand, called him by name, and said, "I'm here to see how you're doing." Because I was wondering, I thought I was going to throw up. It was very weird. He said over and over and over, "I can't believe that you've come to see me. I can't believe you have come to see me." All right, well, here I am. So when I shook his hand, we sat down. I held on, made eye contact, never let loose of his hand. And I said, like it or not, we are indelibly bonded for the rest of our lives because of where we met on one intersection one night. There's nothing that I can do to help your situation, nor is there anything that I want to do to make it worse, because I have no authority about that either. All we have is the truth. Tell me about that night. And so we talked about choices that we make in our lives, consequences of those choices, what this did to his family, to my family. And we talked for 2.5 hours. And I never let loose of his hand, nor did I break eye contact. And finally stood up and just said, "I bid you peace." Boom. And off I went. It was different because I say, faith, family, friends, forgiveness, which leads to freedom. You see, when we are victimized, we can re-victimize ourselves every day if we remind ourselves that we were a victim. And I was sitting there talking with him, and I thought, if there's someone who had a right to hate this guy, it would be me.
Right.
But here's the key. I refused to house hate inside of me. And I needed to expunge it. And that did it.
How long did it take you to mentally recover? Or was that the key moment that you were able to shed off all of the world's weight that it probably felt like that you were carrying?
That was probably the most significant event. When I came back, that said 6 months and 5 days later, and sang at the first ever Chicago Wolves hockey game. That was great. That was a big moment. To come back to Wrigley and sing again the next opening day was great. And little by little, the things, it's farther away in the distance. But that particular visit, I think, was cleansing.
Very interesting. I really hope that there's listeners that will take what Wayne is saying to heart. I am, and I'm starting to rethink parts of my life, which is in a positive way. What advice can you give to people who are victims of violent crime, offenders of violent crime, and police in the greater criminal justice system?
It's a cesspool right now, and we've lost such a respect for each other. I mean, the kid who pulled the trigger on me had no respect for life. I mean, I could have been a tin can on a fence post. I would say everyone is irritated with somebody. And I do a lot of speaking, too, as a speaker. And I will ask somebody, do you have somebody that you really are angry at? Yeah. Why? Oh, my brother-in-law. Okay, why? He borrowed my lawnmower and brought it back without any gas. I haven't spoken to him in 2 years. That's when it gives me the platform to say, think how foolish this sounds. When you sit, and it's not like, hey, look at me, but if you can sit down with somebody who was the mastermind of an event that almost took your life and your livelihood, and go through the process of forgiveness, let me tell you, the lawnmower incident is foolish, and you should be embarrassed. Advice? Well, I will be honest about this because I came back. If I was never able to sing again, I do not know whether I'd be able to have that same positive spin you can be angry for almost ever. I mean, I was a centimeter away from doing my speaking dates by, blowing in a tube and coming out on stage in a wheelchair.
Right.
A lot of stuff in your neck when you get hit with a 9mm. It's usually not a good result.
Right. So, what did I not ask you about the incident that you would like, or the recovery, which is really what this is about? It's about forgiveness. What didn't I ask you that you can share with the listeners?
Well, I think it's being honest with yourself. There were 29 consecutive days with something about this incident in one paper or another, or several. On the 30th day, there was nothing in the paper, and the silence was deafening. I stood in my living room, and by that point, my wife had to get back to her life and go back to school, teaching. The family wasn't quite as hovering as they were. Friends were like, if you need anything, but then you don't hear from them for months. It was a painful moment when I thought, it's not fair, but life is not always fair. But shooting the leg, shooting the arm, something like that, but geez, to steal my voice. There were moments when I just stood in my living room all by myself and just wept. But then it's like, okay, get over yourself. And what can we do? What can we do? How can we be better? I thought, well, okay, maybe I won't be able to sing again, but years earlier, I had done a master's degree in counseling, and I thought, you know what, maybe I'll do that, and I'll be a gravel voice psychologist. So I started working on a PhD, which I got, and I got that, and I was able to still sing. So
it's a lot of blessings with the story. A lot of blessings, like one right after the other.
I know, yeah.
So I want to pivot to Wayne Messmer today. You have a radio show.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell our listeners about it and where they can listen to it?
It's kind of funny because back when I first got a job in Chicago at WXFM 105.9, the guy who hired me for weekend, just engineering and stuff, and I think I got $5.50 an hour or something like that. He said, well, don't expect you're going to have a Wayne Messmer radio show. Okay. And that always stuck with me, because the name of my program now is the Wayne Messmer Radio Show.
Good for you. Good for you.
It's on Chicago's home for jazz, so it's a WDCP 90.9 FM, and it, like everyone else, it streams. So the WDCP.org, and I'm on 7 o'clock till 8 o'clock on Sunday nights. The program is basically just a working musician, that's me, who plays good tunes, provides some positive mojo and some good company for an hour, kind of unplugging from the grid. It's a ball. It's therapy for me. Slap on the headphone, and I've always loved radio, and it's a lot of fun. And I get emails and notes and messages from people all over the country because of the streaming, and it's fun. No commercials. I pick the tunes and create a playlist and just have a ball.
That's awesome. And you also do other things as well, like keynote speaking. How do you find places to give a speech? Do people reach out to you? Is there like a board or someone, an RFP that you say, oh, I can talk about forgiveness, I can talk about, this incident or whatever other topics you have? How do you get speaking engagements?
Well, a lot of word of mouth. After doing this for years, people have either heard of me or heard me speak, and you've got to hustle for it, even if they do know your name. It's a combination of things, of reaching out to people that may have a situation with their employees or their company or their association. It might be improved by talking about attitude and commitment and perseverance, which are 3 points that I really hammer on during my talk. So it's, hey, I'm still here, is that kind of thing, reaching out and not begging people, but just keeping a presence, keeping a top of mind awareness. Because, every once in a while you'll hear, gee, I didn't know you did that. Well, I've been doing it for 40 years, but I guess I've never rung your doorbell before and told you about it. So.
Obviously, you sing the national anthem and other patriotic songs. Are there any upcoming public events that, say, a listener could come and hear you sing at that you'd like to share?
Let's see. I have a pretty good one coming up. It's a fundraiser for the North Suburban YMCA up in Northbrook. on September 8th.
Are you going to be singing The Village People?
No,
I'm kidding. Little music joke there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But that'll be with my quartet. So that's a wonderful pianist who I'm working with this afternoon, a guy named Chris White, who's magnificent, and a bass player, upright bass, the way it's supposed to be played. My favorite sideman, Dave Katz, who plays trumpet and flugelhorn just magnificently. So that's my quartet. So we'll do a 2-hour gig. And it was funny, I just did something. We have a Wisconsin lake home, and I told Kathleen, I said, I want to do a concert on our property. Okay. So we put up a tent, and I've got my guys up there, and a week ago on Saturday, we just invited a bunch of people, and about 50 of them showed up and did a 2-hour gig. And it was a blast. It was like, okay, for all of my friends and family who are too cheap to pay for the cover charges when we do club days.
Right.
Come up to the lake and we'll have some fun.
And you also have some acting experience. I looked you up on IMDb, and then I tried to stream it. I can't find it streaming. But you were in the movie The Babe as the Yankee announcer. And all I have to say is at least you weren't the Mets announcer. No, that's a Yankee Mets joke.
The Stinking Mets, that's their official name.
The Stinking Mets. That's funny. That's kind of...
I did. Listen, you'll appreciate this because I could tell that you were on the same page when it
Yes.
comes to that. There was a 30 for 30 thing that I voiced, and it was the lights at Wrigley Field. And as I'm reading the script, I see the Mets, and I just instinctively said, the Stinking Mets, and they left it in.
Nice. That's awesome. I love it. That's something I would have pulled too. That's terrific. And then you also coach and mentor others. So this is just a phenomenal individual. Whom do you coach? Is it musicians, business people, public speaking, keynote speakers? What's your clientele like?
Kind of all of the above. What are you trying to accomplish? In a coaching capacity, you're really helping people to do what they probably would have done by themselves, except that you cut down the time of trying to get there. So, it's over Zoom, and I do other singers. I coach a couple other singers that are pretty good. They're actually very good. And then whether it's a business person or career transition, or it might be family stuff, because with a psychology background, my coaching sometimes is more, I don't want to say therapeutic, but it's certainly more counseling than coaching as well.
Interesting.
And that's kind of fun. I enjoy that.
That's terrific. So if a listener wanted to get a hold of you to book a keynote speech, hire you to sing, or wanted you to be their coach, how could they get a hold of you? What would your contact information be?
It would just be the website, just WayneMessmer.com.
And that is WAYNE, M as in Mary, ESS, M as in Mary, ER.com.
That's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here with Wayne Messmer, and I reserve this description only for a few people in my life, and it certainly fits Wayne. He is the epitome of what a good Christian should be. Really an example setter. I'll call him a quiet leader because he's really a leader in the community, and he can use his stature to help people. Wayne, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me today. What final thoughts can you offer?
I will point out to the listeners that I do many other things, but one in particular, as an actor, I portray this character who's now sainted, he's canonized, Father Damien, who was in the late 1860s through 1889, was in Hawaii, who lived, worked, and ultimately died among the leper community. Powerful story. It's a one-man play. I've been doing that since 2002. And so you can kind of keep an eye out for that when it appears. I do that in churches. It's just me for an hour and a half. And Kathleen works with me on this because we did a lot of rewrite of this play. It was kind of deadly when we first discovered it. And we do some transitional music under the stories, and a couple voiceover things that come on. But it is powerful, and it's just called Damien.
And where could people look that up to maybe attend?
All of my stuff is on the website. Where's
Perfect.
Wayne, or Wayne's schedule, whatever we call it.
Okay, great. Well, Once again, I am eternally grateful to you, not only for just taking time for little old me, but for educating our listeners, getting your story out there, and for being a good human being. Thank you, Wayne.
Well, those are very kind words I take to heart. Thank you, Marcus. I have enjoyed our conversation.
So not only did Wayne Messmer heal himself, he has healed other people just through his messaging. When he gets up there and he talks about forgiveness like he did, it had an impact on me. When I was younger, I was a teenager, and my father had passed away, and we had a family member who started a conflict at his funeral minutes before it started. And I was very distraught to begin with. On top of that, I had this, and I never forgave that person. I really didn't. I felt slighted. I felt it was totally egregious, totally inappropriate. I was appalled. But as now I'm older, I'm understanding that people are responsible for their own responses. People are responsible. If they act like a jerk, that's not a reflection on me. That's a reflection on them. And after recording this and reading his book and continuing to hear that forgiveness is freeing, in my head, I forgave that person. And I'll never forget it. Don't get me wrong. And I'm a big believer in fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But at the same time, I can now move on with my life and say, I held on to that anger, and it wasn't a big deal. It was to me, but in the big scheme of things, nobody got hurt, nobody got injured, nobody had to recover. So I now have forgiven this person. And I'm saying this publicly. The person doesn't even know I felt slighted, and I haven't talked to them in decades. Now that I'm older and I reminisce more about younger days, I didn't think I would be that person, but I am. Life was too short. You don't have to associate with people who you don't like. It is okay not to do that. But when we hold on to anger, it kind of rots us from the inside. So that was a healing step for me just from listening to Dr. Messmer. One of the things I also want to share is my definition of a hero. And while a hero is a police officer who kicks in the door and goes and saves everyone, or a firefighter who bashes in a window and pulls out children, those certainly are heroes. The military certainly is heroes. They put themselves in harm's way to help other people. Now, Dr. Messmer did not put himself in harm's way. He was put in harm's way. And his story is so inspiring. I look at a hero as somebody who positively affects others. And I'll give you another example of that. Before I do, though, Wayne positively affected others. Every day for a month in the paper, there was a story about him. Everyone gave him standing ovations because he's a fantastic singer, don't get me wrong. But the fact that he overcame and triumphed and did what the doctor said he couldn't do is heroic. My father, I look at him as a quiet hero. Was he a hero? Did he kick in the door? Did he pull people out of a fire? No, absolutely not. He was an engineer, but to me, he was a hero. One of the things that made him a hero to me is, I've mentioned this in other shows, he was terminally ill and in a tremendous amount of pain. Never complained. Never, ever complained. I never knew until much later, because I was younger, that how much pain he was actually in and how much he had to endure. When I was sick, I tried to keep a smile on my face. My mother did that as well. She's also heroic to me. But he did affect other people positively. You've heard of the photocopy machine. Well, he was the first one to design the modern photocopy machine. Before that, it was the mimeograph. And he did affect other people's lives. He's what I call a quiet hero because he wasn't in the limelight. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be replaying Wayne's Star Spangled Banner momentarily, and hope you have a great weekend. If you are fasting, have an easy fast. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
We have monthly concealed carry license CCL classes in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Dates can be seen at firearmmentor.com/classes. If you have a question, we can be reached at www.firearmmentorcard.com. That is our electronic business card, has all of our contact information and links in it. It's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll see you at the shooting range. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor signing off. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.